Welcome back to Rolando Estacada, and this is a very special day for the Rolando Estacada channel and my subscribers. This is a very special treat. This is a custom itak sword. The itak is a Filipino sword design, and this is a custom collaboration with Forged in Fire Latin American judge and Jerry Fisk protege Ricardo Vilar. And some of you may remember him from my Blade Show 2024 episode when I went to visit the Blade Show in Atlanta this past June. And also with none other than legendary Kali instructor and judge on Forged in Fire, Kuya, Doug Marcaida. I call him Kuya because that means brother, older brother in Tagalog. So I'm very happy to share this itak with you. But that would not have been possible if it were not for the generosity of its owner, Dwayne Rowe, to loan it for the Rolando Estacada channel for me to take a look at. Dwayne, thank you very much for your generosity. I'll make sure to take care of him very well. Also, the other thing I want to mention is that this sword collaboration was designed off of the itak trainer that is available on Kuya Doug's website, but it is he designed it so that when he sent it to Ricardo, he sent it almost like a template. So he basically challenged Ricardo and said, "Hey, what kind of sword can you make out of this?" And that sword came out to be this fantastic creation that we are looking at here now. And I got to tell you, when he created it, this is actually going to be featured at the Arkansas James Black Bowie Knife Festival. So that's coming up in April 2025. So a lot to look forward to in 2025, but also a lot to unpack in this video. So there's so much to discuss. There's so many things going on with this sword. I will say that first and foremost, let's take a look at that steel. And if we do a bit of a close-up here, I was told that this is 275 layers of 1080 steel and 15N20. You can see, look at the beautiful designs on that. You know, you have this, it has a lot of wave-like, so it's like wave Damascus. It looks like ripples in the ocean or ripples in radio waves, actually. So it says, you know, it's almost like an homage to what it can do in terms of how it can travel through space in terms of its wave-like capabilities. I had a chance to move with it a little bit, and boy, oh boy, is this alive in my hands. And I would say the overall length is somewhere between 27 and 28 inches. It is very light in the hand, and I would say, I don't have a scale with me, but I would say this is maybe a little over a pound. So when I hold it in a neutral position, so it's kind of pointing up like this, it feels sometimes under a pound, but I'm gonna say it's gonna be overall weight is just a little over a pound, which is one heck of an accomplishment by Ricardo. So that's what the material is. I'm taking a look at the handle here. So this is a full tank construction. So right about here, you can see this full tank construction of 1080 and 15N20 steel in 275 layers. And you can see these pins here that are really smooth, and just by looking at the wood handle, I'm going to assume that this is either walnut or maple. My guess is that this is a very fantastic, super beautiful grain walnut. Just take a look at this fantastic design. You see that fuller at the top, which adds to the fact that it's much lighter. I love this little design here that Kuya Doug had. So it acts a bit like a guard and a bit like a sub hilt, which I think is great. And look how that distal taper on the spine is. Just look at that. Now I know what everybody is thinking. If we take a look at that top edge, it's hard to tell from the video, but this is what I love. This is a sharpened edge. So what you have basically is at the very top And I love this design. As a Filipino martial artist, this is something that I've always craved, and something that Kuya Doug and I have had a chance to discuss, because he loves the buoy, I love the buoy. And the one thing that we always, I'm not going to say we always, I know I always have, but it's very clear to see from this sword design that I think he always has also, is that a Filipino sword has to have this sharpened top 3/4 edge, so that's just a swedge. So I think that's just, look at this beauty. I think that's just great that he was able to include it in the design. And Ricardo's craftsmanship is just so spectacular because it's just alive in the hand. Now I'm about to do something here, and it's going to be a little bit mind-blowing, because I'm going to take my hand and just watch very carefully how it flexes. There's a little bit, and you're gonna see just how much this blade actually flexes and comes back to true. Flexes and comes back to true. That's really spectacular, because most Filipino swords, and in fact most Asian swords, do not have that kind of flex. So it says a lot about its strength, its resilience. So this is, because of that, this is one of those truly amazing swords that can be taken to battle because of its sharpness, because of its true flex, its ability to flex and then come back to true. That is amazing. I don't really want to test it that far, like really bend it, because I just have so much respect for it. But I know that if you really flex this, probably up to about 30 degrees, maybe even 45, I think it's going to come back to true. I don't have the equipment to test that, but wow, this is really spectacular. I'm going to do a movement video with this, but that said, I just want to show you what I've noticed with this sword thus far, just from holding it. So first and foremost, you can see that it has a relatively curved handle, which is great because that makes it more ergonomic. There's a bit of a dip here, so then that way, when my index and thumb wrap around here, there's this nice, very slight swell here, so it fills the hand. That's fantastic. But then, this is the part that I really noticed. When it's this kind of neutral radial ulnar deviation, meaning that my wrist is straight, there's no deviation here. When I hold it in this position, where the tip is up, pointing towards the ceiling, you don't feel the weight. Now, this is where the real test is, as far as how it's going to move is concerned, as far as swords are, in terms of my criteria. Because the main thing I'm going to decide is this going to be a very light sword, so it's arm-centric, or is it going to be a heavy sword, meaning it's core-centric, meaning I have to shift the fulcrum a little bit towards my hip. And you can usually tell that when the sword starts to fall forward and when it starts to feel quote-unquote heavy. There are definitely other dynamics going on before I decide. That's going on in the hand, going on in the wrist and the shoulder, but this is the real test here. So right about here, with no radial ulnar deviation, my wrist is relatively neutral. The real test is when it starts to feel heavy. Still light, right about here. I start to feel it at the base of the palm of my hand, and past, yep, right there, right at about 45 degrees. That's when you start to feel him want to go forward. So it's almost right when it's about to thrust, right about here. And that's spectacular because most Filipino swords, and I would say most Filipino swords, have a tendency that once it just starts to tip forward a little bit, it wants to run away and become a chopper. And I think that with most martial artists nowadays, especially who are Filipino, especially Filipino martial artists who have a tendency towards sword arts, I think that there's a level of athleticism there where we want to be able to redirect something. I think redirection is more important. So when you have a sword here, all right, so relatively neutral, going from this to this, what determines how it's going to move is, well, when does it start to feel quote unquote heavy? And normally with a Filipino sword, usually it's right about here, like right about 15 degrees. So all it really needs is a little release of the finger, and thumb, and then off it goes. It's ready to cut, right? Like ready to chop almost. But this one, is that you can tell just by the craftsmanship and the hyper intentionality around redirecting. You can tell that I can let it go. You see how it's still not really falling forward, but it has to, if I let it go and then slowly let go with the middle finger and then maybe the ring finger, you can start, yep, right there. It starts to drive its momentum. And right here, the very bottom of that handle starts to press into my mechanoreceptors, which means that my tricep line can fire. So from here, I can do push cuts. I can do a thrust if need to. Or if I need to redirect, really, I just have to pull these two fingers and then off I go. And it's that the redirecting is important because look at that false edge. This can back cut. That means this can back cut. So that redirection was intentional, and the balance of it is intentional so that it doesn't completely fall forward upon just letting this one go. You have to let go of almost all three of them, and then you can redirect. Wow. These are my first impressions of this magnificent Kuya Doug Marcaida and Ricardo Vilar collaboration, which will be featured in the April 2025 Arkansas James Black Bowie Knife Festival. That's April 2025, and I plan to be there. And I would say that I know that this sword is going to be there. It's going to be featured there. So I'm very grateful that I have had a chance to handle this in this first impression review. And the next thing for you to look out for, how I move with the Doug Marcaida Ricardo Vilar Itak, and most of all, to see how educative it is in terms of how it teaches me how to move as a Filipino martial artist. Thank you very much for viewing this video. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.